Welcome to episode 22 of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we've got some things to discuss. First off, I want to really apologize for missing last week's episode and there being some delays in the episodes coming out. I had a special guest lined up. There were some conflicts lined up, and then with that and my actual real job, and then I actually had some technical difficulties with the microphone. So just a few things kind of went on top of each other, which led to the delays in the podcast coming out. I still do plan to have some guests coming on here soon, so stay on the lookout for that. But wanted to put out an episode to discuss a couple of things that went down in regards to the basketball team, as well as the scrimmage and a few other things that happened on the football side of the house. So want to discuss those today, put out an episode, maybe a little shorter than normal. We'll be back to regularly scheduled programming next week. Plan is to try to record that around Tuesday, come out Wednesday next week. So back to normal next week, but wanted to put one out this week a little early, just as kind of an apology. Like I said, back to normal next week. So we're going to start with basketball news. There hasn't been a ton, but there has been a few things that have either been officially confirmed and then some Twitter fun that Preston Murphy's been having. So first off, I know we've discussed the out-of-conference games, non-conference games a few times, and there were some discussions around who Alabama would be playing in that Players Era tournament in Las Vegas, which is that NIL tournament that they're a part of. The only team that we had fully confirmed was Houston. They were trying to set up what was going to be the format of that tournament, whether it was going to be two four-team pools, or whether the two four-team brackets were going to intersect each other. And it is fully determined at this point that the four teams that Alabama is paired with is the teams they're going to be playing, right? So the three teams they're paired with is who they'll be playing. So their games are officially against Houston, Rutgers, and Notre Dame. There were already the teams on the other side of the bracket were A&M and Creighton. They already play Creighton earlier in the year, I believe, or later, I forget where the timing works out. And then A&M, you're not allowed to play somebody from your same conference in one of these MTEs. So I think it completely makes sense that this is what ends up working out, but it's officially been confirmed that is how that's going to work out. So the opponents for that tournament are officially, known by the order isn't fully known at this point, but Houston is the first game, is the only one that we know for sure. Then, really, really big news on the recruiting side of the house that number one prospect for next season, AJ DeBansa, released his top 7, and Alabama is in that list. It's expected that Alabama will be a contender in this. Whether or not they're able to fully bring it home or not, ceases to be seen. I'm sure Preston Murphy is hard at work on that. DeBansa played at Prolific Prep with Aiden and Darian Reed, so there is a lot of familiarity with them. The Preston, Nate Oates, and staff have seen him play many, many times. On top of that, at one time, Preston Murphy coached one of DeBansa's AAU teams, or was a part of help coaching that. So it is a standpoint where DeBansa is very well known to the staff. I think but the thing to consider is this prospect is one of the top prospects in the country. He is the consensus number one overall prospect for next season. Is one of the shoe-ins potentially for a number one overall pick in the NBA draft. So this is somebody that we've obviously made it to the top 7, which is huge, but closing this one out is not going to be easy. So it's something to just kind of keep an eye on. I wouldn't worry too much about it at this point, but definitely something to keep an eye on and see kind of how everything flies out. Another prospect for next year that Alabama is doing really well about, and that's where the trolling aspect comes into mind, is Preston Murphy, right? So Preston Murphy, Alabama assistant coach, well known for his Twitter antics. Largely you saw a lot of Twitter antics surrounding the Cliff Amori, when he was doing all the Clifford the Big Red Dog memes and things of the sort. And the one this time is, and I'm going to flash it up here on the screen, but he tweets out a photo that says, "Riddle me this, what belongs in the blank card?" And it's a photo of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Justin Jefferson, and Jimmy Johnson. And clearly the hint is JJ, JJ, JJ. So if you're following basketball recruiting, Alabama is in the kind of top 3, but currently in the lead for a guy originally from Lexington, Kentucky. We're competing with Kentucky and North Carolina for Jasper Johnson. And so it's kind of, hey, this is him just poking at Jasper Johnson. This is, he's going to land him. And then today, actually, I'm recording this on Sunday, he tweeted out, did you guess Jonathan Jefferson, born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, second-year graduate for the assistant men's basketball? Obviously, completely kind of a joke. He knows what everyone assumes it was. He did it on purpose. He even meant Jasper Johnson. I know there were a lot of Kentucky fans that were pretty upset that it looks like Alabama was going to land a guy out of their backyard. North Carolina's, super upset that they potentially have lost for like the 3rd straight time to Nate Oates in recruiting. And then obviously twice in actual basketball as well. So this has been a really, really funny, kind of Twitter experience. If you don't follow Preston on Twitter, I really recommend it. He does as good a job as any coach in the country when it comes to social media and, what people are interested in and creating buzz and stuff like that. I think Preston does an awesome job, and he's one of the best recruiters in the country, and it, shows by the recruiting class he was able to land this last year. And I think that, Jasper Johnson and potentially DeBanza are, you'll see these guys potentially be landed by him, and he's a huge piece as to why Nate Oates has been able to build the roster that he was able to build this offseason, right? So definitely recommend following Preston if you currently don't. That's really all we had for basketball news. Like I said, there's not a ton of basketball news, just a few things confirmed and kind of the memes of Preston, throwing out the Jasper Johnson hints and stuff. So like I said, if you're not following, I definitely recommend it. We're going to move over to football. There's a few things I want to discuss with football, and one of them, we'll just get started. So with football, I want to first start with the shout out to Will Reichard. Will Reichard kicked a game-winning field goal for the Vikings here in the first preseason game. Will Reichard doing Will Reichard things. This surprises nobody that saw him kick to Alabama for the last few years. He was nails, pretty famously when Will Reichard hurt his groin. I believe it was in his freshman year. There was a comment, and I think it was Gene Stallings reached out to Saban and said, you got to get a kicker. And Saban, kind of famously told him, I have a kicker. He's just hurt right now. I promise you he's the guy. And that ended up being Will Reichard. And he knew the kind of kicker that he had in the, in the bag and that he had on the team. And, Will Reichard went on to set every record at Alabama. He's the all-time points leader in the NCAA now. And, so kicking the game winner for him, was absolutely nothing. But it was, cool to see, Will Reichard, starting his success in the NFL pretty early. The next thing I wanted to talk about is one of the craziest things I've ever experienced. And I really want to discuss it in the comments. So I've lived in Alabama almost my entire life. The only time that I didn't live in Alabama, I lived in Texas with my job. I lived in Dallas, which is honestly just as hot as Alabama, and honestly a little hotter in the summer. Humidity in Alabama is a little worse, but in Texas, it's 108, not uncommon at all for the summer. And in Alabama here this summer, it's been, high 90s, 60, 70% humidity. That's pretty common in the summer. Lower humidity days, maybe 40, 50 at the lowest. And our defensive coordinator, Kane Wommack, is wearing a hoodie to practice. And it's the craziest thing I've ever seen, right? I'm wearing a hoodie right now, but I'm wearing a hoodie in my house in the AC. I feel comfortable in it. Kane Wommack is wearing it at 95 degrees and just sweating and losing 10 pounds at practice, it feels like. And he was asked about it, and he said that, he did it when he was at Mobile, and he kind of uses it, to sweat and, lose weight and, just all sorts of different reasons. But it's just honestly one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And I know defensive coordinators have a kind of notion for being, a couple of screws loose or, potentially just odd ducks. And I think that this kind of goes to show that, yeah, that's probably true. But still, a hoodie at practice is one of the most insane things I've ever seen in the Alabama heat. And so I want to discuss, would you ever do this, right? And obviously, I don't mean hey, I'm having to run to the store, I wore a hoodie outside. I mean, he's coaching these guys, and he's wearing a full-on hoodie, like I said, at a full practice. And to me, it's just one of the craziest things I've ever seen, and want to know what everybody's thoughts are. The next thing I want to discuss is actually something that's kind of pretty close to me. So for those of you that don't know, I graduated from the university in 2019. I was in communications and PR, and as a part of that, I did have classes with quite a few football players. The way it was kind of known to me is if I had classes in the morning, there was a very good chance I was going to have football players in that class, and then if I had classes in the afternoon, I wouldn't, because under Saban, they had football in the afternoon. And one of the guys who I had classes with on a couple of occasions was Damien Harris. And I bring him up because Damien Harris, recently retired from the NFL. And it was announced this weekend that Damien Harris would be taking over for Christian Miller on the sideline duties for Crimson Tide Sports Network with the radio guys, with Chris Stewart and everybody. And I think that's a really cool job, right? I think that Damien will be absolutely incredible at it. Like I said, I had quite a few communications classes with him. He's as good a kid good a guy as they come. I really respect him, really like him. Any interaction I've ever had with Damien, whether it be class or, just joking around or whatever, has always been super positive. The way I always describe Damien, he's the guy you want to be around. The best example I have for that is we were in a criminal justice class. For anybody that's, been on the capstone before, Criminal Justice 100 with Klutz in the big Russell Auditorium. So for those of you that don't know, Russell Auditorium is about 400 seats. It's kind of the biggest auditorium on campus. And there's a criminal justice class that's pretty famous that a ton of people like to take. And me and Damien had that class together on top of some others. But that year we had that class together, and me and him were sitting in the back of class together. I was sitting with him, and somebody in the front row, again, so this thing's probably 40 rows, right? This is a huge auditorium. And somebody in the very front, first or second row, sneezed. And Damien stood up from the back of class and screamed, "Bless you." Everybody laughed for a second, and it's just that's the kind of guy who Damien is. Like I said, he's a little bit of a jokester. Obviously, he can be serious if he needs to be, but he's the guy you kind of want to be around. He's super fun to be around, and I think that he will bring, obviously, the knowledge of the game, right? He played in the NFL, played for Alabama, and the respect that it deserves. But also, I think that he will be somebody that, will bring something to Crimson Tide Sports Network. They maybe, not that Christian Miller did a bad job by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that he's going to be a little different personality-wise than what Damien brings. And I think that's going to be really good. And I'm really proud of Damien, for kind of getting that opportunity. And I'm curious to see how that works out. So, like I said, really looking forward to seeing that. Like I said, it was cool seeing that. And obviously, having followed his career while he was at Alabama and beyond has been really cool to see. And then the last thing that I want to discuss is some notes from the scrimmage. So one of the guys who I hope to eventually have on as a guest is Pat. Pat is one of the intel guys on the Crimson Crossover. On the Crimson Crossover Discord, if you're not a member or don't follow along, I really recommend it. There's channels for football and basketball and intel and all sorts of different stuff. And, Pat, put kind of some notes out on the scrimmage. And I've also, kind of compiled some notes from some other media guys. And I just want to go through what I look at as some of the highlights of what happened at the scrimmage and what we're really still looking to see kind of moving forward. So first things first, pretty across the board. The quarterback room was seen to be, everything went well. Milroe seemed, the throwing motion, there were some videos that coming out where he did tweak his throwing motion, and everything seems to, everybody likes what they've seen out of Milroe. He did not have, any interceptions, to the knowledge of what we've seen, and he was taking what the defense gave him, right? So he was, progressing through his reads, and, the throwing motion looks good, and, nothing really negative to say about Milroe on that side. There was a very big touchdown pass, like a 50-yard touchdown pass to Ryan Williams, freshman, kind of known as the guy who, said he was going to visit Auburn, then comes to Alabama, then I saw him at a few basketball games this past year. He was at College Game Day. Like, he definitely is, reveled in the experience. He early enrolled. He's supposed to be a senior this year in high school and just an absolute dog. He's was in the starting group with the receivers, and he showed out. Like I said, he had a 50-yard touchdown and some other good catches from what I've heard. Also, Odom, the 6'5" guy who I believe came in as a tight end, but shifted over to wide receiver. He, from all intents and purposes, is just an absolute elite weapon, especially at his size. There was a video floating around that the football team posted on Twitter showing a one-handed catch from the scrimmage as well. That was really, really cool. Bernard is starting to get a lot of Mechie comparisons. Just sure-handed. And having somebody like that on the team is never a bad thing. And, I think that his knowledge of the system as well, having been with DeBoer at Washington and having worked under Odunze and all the guys at Washington, I think that Bernard's going to be a really good, obviously addition to this wide receiver room. I think that everything that we've seen out of him has been positive. And then the running back room is something that, in my opinion, I look at Justice Haynes to be, 1A and Jem Miller to be 1B. I know some people look at Miller potentially to be the starter. Like I said, personally, I look at Haynes to be the one. And everything we've heard coming out of practice, it sounds like Haynes is typically taking the reps with the ones, but they're very interchangeable. Kind of depends on the day as to who's taking the most reps. Sounds like Miller was a little bit more explosive, specifically in this one scrimmage, but that's not to say that Haynes isn't explosive. Obviously, anybody that's seen him knows that he is and knows the ability that he has and what he brings to the table. And then looking at the moving over to the offensive line, started out a little slow. From everything I've read and seen, the offensive line, worked into the day. The big thing DeBoer mentioned, they didn't have any penalties. No false starts, no penalties by the offensive line, and that's big, right? When you're looking at, trying to make sure you're doing everything the way you're supposed to be, not being penalized on. Say you get beat on the offensive line, the kind of gut reaction is to try to get off the jump quicker. And what inevitably happens when you're worried about the pass rush is you'll end up getting a false start because you're worried about the pass rush, right? And so not having any false start penalties, just tells you that there was some level of they kind of worked into their own, got into where they were understanding, yes, this is, we're good. And from everything I've seen, everything I've read, the offensive line definitely got better as the day went along. And then on the defensive side of the end, the defensive line did really, really good at the beginning. And then the offensive line kind of, took over a little bit more later on. But that's obviously the give and the take, right? In a scrimmage, one of the sides has to win, right? So it's not always a bad thing if your defensive line isn't super dominant, because if it was super dominant, then maybe it means your offensive line is doing terrible, right? It doesn't always mean your defensive line is doing bad or good. It just means the offensive line is maybe doing a little bit better. So it honestly was really good to see both of them have success. You know, the defensive line a little early, the offensive line a little bit later. Both lines have the ability to be successful. You know, when you're looking at some guys, you know, just plenty of guys that are able to do all sorts of things. Keon Keeley, from what I've seen, I believe they said he put on 37 pounds. You know, moved inside. You know, going to be really big, really dominant on the inside. 5-star guy. I think that Keeley is kind of set to have a breakout year. He was somebody that I wanted to see a little bit more of last year. I kind of understood because of the position that he was playing. He was sitting behind Turner and Braswell and some of these other guys, and so it made sense. But where they've moved him to and the position that he's playing, I think that Keeley is going to have a huge impact on the games this season. In terms of the linebackers, I mean, Deontay Lawson, Jahad Campbell, they're both back. Justin Jefferson's playing with them. This is going to be one of the best linebacker groups in the country, and definitely in the SEC. You know, you've got some returners that, you know, played huge minutes the past couple of years, especially last season, and so I would fully expect this to be an incredibly good linebacker core. Safeties, same way. You know, Malachi Moore, Keon Sabb, like, your safeties are as good as they come. You got King Mack, came in from Penn State. Keon Sabb, obviously, from Michigan. You know, those two guys, from everything that I've seen, everything I've read and heard from Wommack, seems like they're taking the coaching well. They're, you know, learning the playbook, and they're at a point that they're, you know, able to contribute and be leaders out on the field, which is what you expect out of guys that you're bringing in. You know, after, I believe Mack is a junior, and I think Sabb has 1 year left. And then on the defensive back side, they look pretty raw from everything I've seen. It kind of ceases to be seen. Obviously, Damani Jackson is the guy that is hopefully going to be your one, you know, the transfer from USC. But this is a group that lost a couple of first-round draft picks, and they have plenty of raw talent coming in. You know, you got Mbakwe, you got Xavier Smith, you got Xavier Brown, all these guys coming in, and so I think that they definitely have the ability and the talent. It's just something that they're going to be raw here early, and that's not shocking at all. So it, you know, wouldn't be super crazy, you know, to see them progress obviously better as the season went along. And then finally you got your kicker, and from everything, Nicholson went 2 for 4. From everything I saw, he missed the 2 that he made were long, and the 2 he missed were very, very close. You know, but definitely has a huge leg. Also, you know, Talty got some kicks in. Seems like he did pretty well as well, but sounds like Nicholson definitely has the leg, and you know, maybe not the, you know, we'll just have to see what ends up happening when it comes to, you know, live game practice. You know, Nicholson did beat out Reichard for the Grozo Award, so this, you know, we brought in one of the best kickers in the country, so, you know, I expect that he's going to be as good as advertised. You know, that position is one that, if you're good under pressure and if you're good in certain environments, unless it's weather or something, there's not a whole lot that generally impacts the kicker from team to team, right? It's somebody that if you're good, you're good. It's, you know, the scheme and stuff doesn't really impact the specialist quite as much as it does the other guys. So it doesn't really shock me that he's doing well, that he has the leg that he does. You know, 2 misses in a scrimmage, not going to worry too much about it, especially, you know, they're close, you know, 50%'s still not bad. Obviously, you'd like to see it a little better, but, you're definitely not going to worry too much about, some misses in practice. So that's what happened when it comes to the scrimmage. Like I said, that's just some thoughts. Like I said, most of those thoughts, came from Pat. And like I said, there were some others. DeBoer, like I said, mentioned some comments around being very happy about the no false starts and, doing a really good job avoiding penalties. And it looks like DeBoer said that Alabama ran 102 plays in the scrimmage, with 81 of those being with the ones, right? So, just getting a lot of plays in, a lot of, work in, obviously in the heat, in the, live on live. He was happy about the quarterbacks. He said the plays that are there, they need to make that throw, and they're doing that at a higher level. And, so DeBoer was happy with what he saw. Obviously you're not going to get a ton out of the coaches when it comes to these scrimmages. Nobody's going to go out and say, oh my God, it was terrible. But it is good to see that they're taking positives out of what has taken place in the scrimmage, and that, kind of they've seen what they need to work on, and, some of the things that need to be worked on are looking well. And, obviously potentially there's going to be some things that they would need to keep working on, but such is life. So that's all I wanted to really discuss this week. Like I said, it's a little bit shorter one, but just wanted to discuss the basketball news and the football news. Sorry about missing the episode last week, but like I said, I do plan to have some guests on here soon, and then we'll start doing the previews and stuff when it comes to football, because we have games this month. So I will absolutely be recording the preview and post cap of all football games. So if you are interested in that, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do appreciate everybody's support, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.